the public. The CCG is committed to openness and transparency and therefore wishes to conduct as much of its business as possible in a session that the public can attend and observe. Although the meeting is held in public, it is not a public meeting. This means that there is no opportunity for the public to ask questions apart from that offered at the Chair's discretion. There is a specific slot at the end of the agenda for separate questions. The governing body meeting is also being video recorded as part of the commitment to make information as accessible as possible. The video will be put onto the website within a few days of the meeting. The CCG does not allow any other recordings of the governing body unless agreed by the Chair prior to the meeting. The CCG has a protocol setting out how it will conduct its meetings, and this is available on the CCG website. So welcome everyone, and welcome public. And just to let you know, we've got, thank you, and just to let you know, we've got apologies from Paul, Phil, Catherine and Neil, but Neil, I think Jenny's attending on his behalf, Neil Farrelly. Okay, any other apologies that we know about? No? Okay, so as regards declarations of interest, any items on the agenda that people wish to declare which have not already been declared on the website? No? Okay, so if we can come to the minutes of the previous meeting back in November, I'll have to be guided by my colleagues as I wasn't present for this. So that's attachment A1. So on, so that's page 1, 2 for matters of accuracy, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. No, so we can sign them off as an accurate record. We've got 3 outstanding actions, so I don't know whether people could just give us a summary, Fergus.
So for the first action, I'm happy to say this could be closed. It's on track to be presented at the Integrated Quality Governance Committee happening the week after next, Chair.
Great, thank you, Fergus. And on public question time, it says identify the date range of 500 discharge summaries that had not been accessed by general practice and to review and monitor. So Naeem, Naeem's not here. Right, okay, so we'll have to take that, we'll have to just chase it up with Naeem after the meeting, so apologies for that. There was an issue around public question time on whether the general practice electronic booking system and it's meant to be raised at the November practice manager meeting. Again, that was taken by Catherine, who's given apologies today. So if we can just get feedback from Catherine, then we can just send it out virtually if possible. Right, so if we can come to the agenda, sorry, yes.
Well, it's a long way. Yes, I just wanted to ask about that first item on the action log, which was data in relation to health visiting. Because my purpose in asking about it at the last meeting was for the data to come back here. I appreciate it has to go through the IQGC first. And I understand that this is the last formal meeting of the governing body. And therefore my question is, when those data, having been through the IQGC, will be shared with the members of the governing body and how that will be done?
So I would probably recommend that once the IQGC meets and the minutes have been drafted up, that they will be then circulated around to the governing body members at that stage. Okay. Fergus, I presume that's okay.
I'm more than happy to, and actually if it would be helpful, Liz, I could arrange to meet with you subsequently and go through the paper if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Fergus. Yes. After all that spiel, eh? Okay, sorry about that. So if we can come to the agenda proper. So as regards question time, are there any questions from members of the public which are pertaining to items of the agenda that you wish to put forward now? No? Okay, so just to make the governing body aware that there were some items taken in private on the 5th of November. The first one was around the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Therapies Review, a briefing paper. The second was around Moving Forward Together update, and the third was around Developing Place in Kingston. So I'm just going to come to a very brief Chair's report, because obviously we had the holidays over the Christmas New Year period. So just a couple of things I just wanted to make the members aware of. We discussions at a London level with the London Clinical Chairs Committee. We've been talking around refreshing the meetings at a London level to try and get much more clinical input at a London level, and actually linking in with the clinical leadership at a London level. So there is a whole refresh around how the chairs work at a London level, and particularly with the proposed mergers across London, that we're having to try and find different ways of being able to get the views from local boroughs fed into a London level. Locally, I've been meeting with some GP colleagues, including commissioners, PCN clinical directors, as well as governing body GPs around clinical leadership at place. And we've sort of got a brief outline as to how we wish to proceed with this. And I'm going to be calling in other clinicians from other organisations to be able to test this idea with them. So I'll be taking that forward, and I'll be reporting back to the Borough Committee going forward. We've also looked at the Kingston Strategic Partnership development and actually trying to align local visions. So I've been part of the meetings with the local borough. And we've also been looking at place development and also the elections for the Borough Committee, which I think are going to come through from Atin's report from the councillor members as well. So that's a very brief Chair's report. Sarah, did you want to do an out?
Thank you. I am going to steal one of the items from Tonya's Managing Director's report, which is the Improving Healthcare Together programme. You may be aware that in Epsom and St Helier end of the patch, we were given £500 million to invest in new hospitals. And we yesterday, the reason I'm doing this is because we actually made the decision yesterday to go to consult with the public on the options to implement that. So from tomorrow, we will be in public consultation on those options. And as part of that process, the programme would welcome input from other areas as well as from those that are immediately impacted, because there are wider impacts. So I have asked Tonya whether or not she would be happy to look at coordinating a response. Obviously, individual organisations and people can respond themselves, but it might be helpful to have a system response to the Improving Healthcare Together programme as well. So that will happen in due course. But we're really pleased that at last we are out to consultation, or will be tomorrow, and we will be closing that consultation on the 1st of April and hope to make a decision in the summer.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? No? So, Tonya, can we come to the Managing Director's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Quite a long report this time, so I won't go through it in detail. I'll just give you the highlights. Beginning on page 1, people remember that in September we published the discussion document for the 5-year health and care plan for people in South West London. The discussion document was sent to partners at the end of September, and partners were asked to take time over October to discuss it within their organisation. We've received feedback from partner organisations that the plan has been amended to reflect this, and we hope to publish the final document in January 2020. Slightly delayed because of the elections, so hopefully we'll be able to get it out in the next couple of weeks. Then the next item is Moving Forward Together, the staff consultation. In October last year, we received confirmation from NHS England that they had approved our merger to become one South West London CCG on the 1st of April 2020. The next step in the process in establishing the one CCG for South West London was to consult with staff and the proposed team structures to support the single CCG. The staff consultation was launched on the 21st of November, 2019, and it ran for 30 days until the 23rd of December 2019. And during the consultation, staff members had one-to-one meetings with senior managers in their team to discuss their individual positions and give feedback on the proposed structures. All comments have now been received from the staff, are being considered by the senior management team with the aim to publish final structures to staff before the end of January 2020. Then moving on, I've included in the managing's reports just some appendices with updates of actions. So the first appendix 1 provides an update on progress against the patient and public engagement forward plan actions, which we discussed at our September meeting. We also are required to publish our Public Sector Equalities Duties report by the end of January 2020, and the Integrated Equality Governance Committee is being asked to approve that at their January meeting, so we meet the deadline. The next appendix, Appendix 2, provides details of the actions taken around for health around the written state of action that was produced to support system change after our inspection in 2018. I'm glad to say that good progress has been made, and you can see that in the appendix. In terms of our EPRR, which is our Emergency Preparedness and Resilience Response Plan, I'm pleased to say that Fergus yet again has been able to secure full compliance against the core standards 2019. That's a couple of years we've been able to do that now, so I'm pleased to be a report that we are fully compliant against our OPPR plan. A couple of congratulations to some of our partners. I'd like to congratulate Kingston Council Children's Services for getting Ofsted Outstanding following a recent inspection. And the inspectors commented on the significant improvements that Achieving for Children, the Council's children's service providers, made since the last inspection when they received a good rating. So that's really good news for our population. And another good outcome for one of our providers of services, the Mental Health Trust, South West St George's, received a CQC rating of good, which means we have really good services for our population. So that's really good news. The next item on my report was the Improving Healthcare Together programme, which Sarah covered, so I won't dwell on that one. Well, we'd be pleased to know I'm nearly at the end now. Another piece of really good work that we've been doing across South West London is transforming diabetes care, and diabetes is one of the most significant challenges facing health and care. In my report, just highlight some of the South West London pieces of work. The fact that we've been able to secure £120,000 worth of transformation funding for further work addressing the unwarranted variation in management of type 2 diabetes across South West London, and acknowledging the improvements across all CCGs around the results of the National Diabetes Audit, which shows an improvement in the percentage of patients being managed in line with all 3 clinical standards. That's really good news. And finally, just to remind members that this is the last formal meeting of the CCG, we will use the time on the 3rd of March to hold an event to celebrate the achievements of the CCG over the past 7 years, and that all welcome, so you'll be getting some invites out to that soon. That's all I had to say today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, any comments or questions for Tonya's report? Governing body members? No? I've just got one question, Tonya, around the AFC outstanding. Did they make any mention on the send elements of AFC?
No, I don't think send inspection, was it?
It wasn't a sending inspection, but I didn't know whether it did. Okay, thank you.
I don't know.
No, because they inspect that separately. It wasn't part of the pro forma for this one. But yeah, it was great to get outstanding. I mean,
That's
clearly
really
there are
good.
still areas for development. It doesn't mean it's across the board, but that was the summary outcome.
That's really good news. Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Tonya's report? Yeah, Rob. Yes, I think we do. Yeah, we have. Yep. Yes, we have. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tonya. If we can just come to the next item on the agenda, which is the Audit Committee Chair's report. Do you know who's going to be doing? There hasn't been a meeting. Okay, so we'll just have to defer that. Moving forward together, South West London arrangements post-April 2020. So do you want to introduce this?
I'll introduce it. Yeah, so I'll just introduce and then hand over to Ben, who will go through some of the detail. So everyone's aware that we have, all of our members have voted for us to merge across South West London, and we have had confirmation from the regulators that our application was approved. There is still a final part of that process where we will get a formal letter of approval from the regional office, I believe. But actually we are now progressing with the process to do the technical part of the merger, so making sure that we have got everything in ready so that we can go live on the 1st of April. I have mentioned this in other governing bodies that we need to make sure that we are able to go live on the 1st of April, which means we need to get all the technical pieces done. We may not have absolutely everything done for the 1st of April, so it's what's the must-dos and what's the stuff that we then need to carry on into the new CCG to make sure that happens. So Ben will talk us through that, and then when we finish that, then Tonya will talk us through the local arrangements for the Kingston part of the new CCG. So I will pass over to Ben, and he will take us through the papers that you have here.
Thank you. So, very happy to take questions and comments at the end. I was just going to give you a very brief overview and work through the paper as we go. So, since the last time you saw and reviewed the governance documents, we've had a review of these with our legal advisors, and NHS England have also done their first pass of the Constitution. I've taken on board a number of comments through this process, but nothing substantial, mainly to keep us in line with the various bits of legislation that we need to and keep language consistent, etc. These are now back with NHS England for a further review, and I hope to have the next set of comments on those within the next couple of weeks. With regard to appointments to the governing body, we have one interview left for the lay member appointments on the governing body. We're hoping that this will be done by the end of this week, and that we should be able to appoint to all of the lay member and independent member positions by the end of this week, hopefully. That will then allow us to populate the committee structure for the new governing body, which is set out at paragraph 8 and below, and which you should certainly recognise. We haven't obviously been able to put these in diaries or make the appointments to the committees because we've been waiting on those appointments. Paragraph 10 just gives you a very brief overview of where we are with implementation across South West London, and this was a request from some members that they'd just like to see the whole picture, and Tonya is going to go into more detail on the specifics of how it will work in the borough in the next item. With regards to the setup of the programme, so paragraph 11 onwards just gives you an overview and detail about the various work streams. We split the programme into the 6 work streams outlined at paragraph 11. And the various annexes give you more detail on the work that we've been doing around this. So Annex A is a plan on page for the programme, which is just meant to be a very high-level visual representation of what we're delivering between now and April. Annex B goes into much more detail, obviously line items at programme level that we're monitoring delivery against. And below that are individual project plans for each of the work streams. Annex C is the latest status report from the programme, which, as you see, gives good assurance that we're on track for delivering. Some areas slightly behind, but actually we've made up progress since then, and we should be having another status report in the next week or two. Annex D, to the point that Sarah raised, gives you an overview of what day one will look like in the CCG. So the must-haves that we will have in place on day one, and then some of the things that we will be developing over the next couple of months. I've briefly given you an overview of the top 3 risks facing the programme at the current time. I won't go into the detail on them, but I'm very happy to take any questions around that. Then from paragraph 19 onwards, we just go through updates from the various work streams around that. So starting with HR, as Tonya mentioned, the consultation with our staff closed on the 23rd of December. All of the SMT members have had feedback relating to their various areas on that, and we're now working through that feedback, and we're meeting with as an SMT next week to agree the final structures and any impacts that we need to take into account from that feedback. The next annex, Annex E, is a set of flow charts that just describe how the finances will work in the new system, how the money will flow through the system. And I'll just ask James if there's anything else specifically that he wants to raise at this point.
Sorry. No, the only issue on the finances, as you know, we've agreed the 100% delegation, which we're working through. Clearly, we have to operate a single ledger. So that's what we're working through at the moment, how we transition from 6 ledgers into a single ledger and get all the appropriate reporting that you'll need at your local borough level. And then thinking about that, how that evolves into the developing ICS over coming years. Clearly, what we've done so far is we've taken a lot of that through the Joint Finance Committee in Commons. So there has been some local scrutiny over that from on behalf of this committee.
The next section of the paper just gives you an update on how comms and engagement and patient and public involvement will work in the new CCG. The comms and engagement function is already run on a matrix managed basis across South West London, so there won't be so much change to the actual ways of working that. The PPI function will change slightly, so we will have one PPI lay member for the new governing body, obviously. We will also have one, hopefully one Health Watch representative who will represent the 6 Health Watches on the new governing body, and also one representative of the voluntary sectors from across South West London sitting on that. And Tonya will just touch on briefly, I think, in her presentation about how patient and public involvement will be handled at the borough level. The next section outlines at a high level how we will be managing primary care across the new organisation, and we included this specifically because I know a number of members wanted an update around how this will work. It's not my area of expertise, but if we do have any question on this, I'm really happy to take them away, get some answers from the team and feed those back to you. Quite a bit of detail again on quality, because I know that was an area that people wanted some more detail on, and I was just going to ask Fergus to add a bit more to that.
Thanks, Ben. And I just wanted to add that we're really looking forward to some of the opportunities that working at scale will bring to our quality and quality assurance function. We've realised some of those benefits already through the way we've been working at our Integrated Quality Governance Committee, where I think actually having more people in the room discussing the matters that we do there has proved to be really beneficial in the last 12 months. There are some things that it makes more sense to be done at scale, so things like infection control or serious incident investigations where they cut across boundaries and don't fit neatly within local boroughs. I think there's a real opportunity to get the best heads in the room, so to speak, for those. But would want to reassure the governing body that for other areas, it's very important that we keep a very local focus. So things like safeguarding adults, safeguarding children, children looked after, we're absolutely clear that there will be a very strong local borough presence within that. So that dynamic between the two is a really important function for the Director of Quality in the new way of working, to make sure that they're keeping that very local focus, very local flavour, and then using that to influence what we're doing across a wider footprint in South West London. But happy to take any questions specifically around quality.
Thanks, Fergus. And then just to finish up, I've given you a brief overview of what we're doing on the IT and our IG side. There is much more detail behind this, some very comprehensive plans to make sure that all of our IT systems are talking to each other in the new world, and that we have the data flows that we need within the new organisation. So that was all I was going to say on the paper. I'm very happy to take questions, and you'll have another opportunity to discuss some of this in more detail at the February seminars as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. Very comprehensive, and it's very clearly set out, so I think that's really helpful. I've just got one question around the quality, Fergus, is that what's been set out in the paper, I think, has been really helpful to try and distinguish between what is necessarily going to be happening at South West London level and what is probably going to be happening at a local level. Have we got more clarity around terms of reference to try and embed this into the different parts of the system?
So the South West London level terms of reference for the quality and performance oversight group, I think, are scheduled to be finalised in February. In terms of what we've described locally, we've spoken outside of here now, and I've discussed with the chief nurses of our major players, if you like, across Kingston and Richmond, and we're very keen to build on the good relationships that we have, use that as a vehicle by which we provide assurance both to Kingston and Richmond boroughs separately, but then pulling that back together again for the assurance at the South West London level. So in terms of formal terms of reference, I understand that's going to be about 3 to 4 weeks or so for the South West London level.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Liz?
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on paragraph 32, which is in relation to the role of Health Watch. And of course, health watches do have a rather more complex position in relation to the merged CCG because of our statutory responsibilities. It is simpler for the voluntary sector. And we have had discussion about the feasibility of the arrangements. I think the last ones were about 6 weeks ago. I wonder if you could tell me, Ben, the construction here, where it says the patient and public voice role will represent the patient and public interest rather than, and I edit here, all 6 health watches. What circulation to health watches that particular phraseology has had?
So I'm not sure what circulation, but I can check back with Charlotte, who put together this piece of paper, and come back to you if that's helpful.
I think there was a lot of discussion with the health watchers about exactly what their role and function would be on the governing body and how they would be represented.
So I think probably best that we speak to Charlotte, and I know the health watchers have been speaking to Charlotte about this and about payment and how we might backfill Health Watch so that they are not representing individual boroughs, so they're backfilled and they do an additional role which is about South West London. So let's have a talk about that outside. I know that there's been ongoing discussions. I'm not sure we've wrapped all of it up yet, but this is the representation of the South West London governing body. There will be lots of opportunity to still feed in locally, and there is a South West London group outside of the governing body that will still continue to meet, which I think you're on. So all of those things will continue to happen. But I think it's probably better to have that discussion outside because that's where it's been happening, and we can report back to you.
If I could just, I mean, I have been involved in the discussions, indeed, which was why I was slightly surprised to see a construction of the role that certainly Health Watch Kingston hasn't actually seen this particular way of construing the role, which is why I feel that actually there is more discussion to be held before the role is pinned down.
So yes, and we do need to get it agreed. It has been quite difficult, I know, agreeing with all health watches what it should be. So I'm happy to take that back to Charlotte to say could we have some further discussions just to make sure. It might just be a wording issue rather than a misconstruing what's actually happened. So let's go back and check that for you.
Okay, thank you. Iona.
Thanks, Ness. So a question for me was around where we've got some joint commissioning arrangements where the CCG hold the contract, so particularly the Section 75 agreement, where a lot of our community services, school health, mental health, substance misuse services are held, and the sort of contract novation or the new legal framework with a single CCG, and where we are with that.
Okay.
So we will novate all the contracts, every contract over into the new CCG, but they will be managed at a local level. So the local committee, the borough committee will manage the contracts, but obviously the formal novation will go to the new statutory organisation. So there is a process around all of our contracts that will have to go through a technical novation into the new organisation. However, they will be managed at a local level by the borough committees, where they are purely borough focused.
And where we're delegating those functions, I guess we've got to do
absolutely.
the council side, where we're delegating
absolutely.
it to South West
So
London
we're
CCG.
going through all of that. That's the kind of technical side of it. So we're going through all of that with all of the contractual arrangements.
And just to clarify, my understanding is that local arrangements will include things like the pharmaceutical needs assessment being at a borough level, joint strategic needs assessment being largely at a local level, although we may well do population South West London wide
So
too.
absolutely, and it would be really fantastic if we could have more of that at South West London wide. As you know, we've talked about that in the past. So absolutely those things will continue to be at a borough level. I think we do need to think about what's the public health input into South West London and how do we make sure that we have something that makes sense for South West London as well as for local, because I think where we've lost out really, I think, in the past is that we've got very local focus on things like joint strategic needs assessment, which has meant that you can't just put those together into one report for South West London because they often have a very different focus. So we have lacked the ability to be able to maybe have a scale view of some of the things that we might be able to do together. So I think any opportunities that we have to do that better in the future will be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Right, Rob.
So there's no formal consultation on the statutory organisations. That's a formal process around the regulators and the CCGs, and that was for the membership, which the membership have decided that will happen. Locally, there is work going on, and I'm sure that when we get to Tonya's part where she talks about what we're doing locally, she'll be able to tell you what the plan is.
Okay, any other comments or questions around the new organisational status? Okay, all right, Tonya.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, my paper expands on Ben's paper and gives a bit more granular detail of what we're proposing to do locally. I think the paper has three parts to it. It talks about the Borough Committee. It then talks about our partnership. And I have to stress, this is really still draft and actually can only be done with partners. So the CCG works in partnership with others, and it's not up to the CCG to decide how partnerships works. It's a partnership. I keep going to say it. So the things around the partnership are still in conversation with our partners, but would reflect conversations that we've had to date. And then the third section starts to describe for members how we think the local system management could work. Again, it's still draft, and members will have opportunities until March to help scope that, but also try to explain how the Borough Committee and the wider partnership will work together, and actually how we can do this try and do this seamlessly and take out duplication. So if I take it into three sections, it might be the easiest way to do it. So the first one is around the Borough Committee. So as Ben in his paper described, it's on the it's
page 61, and so that's document D.
So the first slide shows the South West London governing body and its committees, of which there will be a borough committee for each of the existing CCGs, and so there will be a Kingston Borough Committee. And the next slide then just gives you some idea of what the role and remit of that Borough Committee will be. It is an emerging piece, so we haven't run the Borough Committee yet, and I expect the remit and roles to expand, particularly when we talk about some of the delegated responsibilities that have come down to Borough. But these are the real areas of focus for the Borough Committee, which is the CCG Committee, will be about having our annual plan, working on the bits that are important to us around the health and care plan that we need to influence, looking at how do we work with our other partners, looking at the plans to reinvest or invest CCG funds based on decisions at play. So there will be something that we will do as a commissioning committee, but it really will be done in partnership with Place, and it will be an emerging piece. So that's the slide that starts to explain the role of the Borough Committee. The next slide just shows you the membership of the Borough Committee. So the Borough Committee is a commissioning committee It is entirely a commissioning committee, that's all it is. And it is a clinical commissioning committee, so the voting membership is, the majority is clinical and GPs. So there will be a chair, and the chair will be the elected GP borough lead, and that role will also be the voting member in the South West London governing body, so you can see where the link between the local borough committee and the South West London governing body is. It's really important that our voting members, our clinical voting members, really reflect the membership and the views of the membership. So the other three will be appointed by the membership, and one of those three will be the chair of the membership as well. So there will be 4 elected GPs on the borough committee. There will be 3 local executives who will also be voting, and then there'll be non-voting members, including a PPI representative. At the moment, we are working on that being Health Watch, but we can obviously discuss that more, but we think that Health Watch would probably provide the best link with the wider population on our borough committee. So that is the membership of the borough committee. As I say, the next slide just shows you the appointments process. We have agreed across South West London, where CCG chairs are want to continue the role past April, they want to continue working, that we will roll over the tenure of the current CCG chair to ensure continuity. I'm pleased to say that the NAS has agreed to carry on, so he will carry on in that role until his current tenure comes up, and I think it's June 2021, is it? April 2021, so NAS will be chair of the borough committee for the first year. And we are starting their process to appoint the other 3 voting members in January, so at the councillor members meeting next Tuesday we will launch that process and hope to have it completed within a month. So hopefully we'll be able to announce who the other 3 are in that time frame. So that's all I was going to say about the borough committee at the moment. Is there any comments, questions, observations?
Any points of clarification around this? No, Rob. So the clinical commissioning group is a GP-led organisation, and so within the borough committee it's part of the CCG. So I think what you're asking is probably coming along later in the pack that Tonya is going to be presenting around how you integrate with other partners as well. But this is a purely commissioning organisation. So if you just bear with us and just let Tonya complete, then you'll find out where the other organisations are fitting in. No, so if we come through to the later pack, you'll see how the integration piece works.
So the next part of the paper describes our emerging integrated care partnership in Kingston. As I say, it is a draft piece of work because this is being done in partnership, and quite a wide partnership when you see the membership. But I think it's important because it's a complexity around the borough committee and the integrated care partnership board. They are 2 separate, very distinct and separate things. As I say, the borough committee is a committee of the CCG. Our partnership board is a partnership board that brings all our partners together. So they are 2 different things, and the borough committee is a partner in the partnership. So, as you say, just to give you some background, the long-term plan describes each STP area being an integrated care system by April 2021, and in South West London we have flagged our intention to become an integrated care system from April 2020, and that was agreed by the Health and Care Partnership Board. And the Kingston Integrated Care Partnership, what we start to describe, is supports the local delivery of that integrated care system. So the next slide just shows you the interaction between the 2 committees. So you have the Kingston Coordinated Care Partnership Board, that is our partnership, and that has representation, and we're expanding that representation. I think in our January meeting we're starting to expand that. I'm looking at Vicky because I think, are we expanding it out in January? So we are widening the representation on that partnership board from this month. and it is separate to the borough committee. The borough committee is a member of the partnership board. So the borough committee reports into South West London governing body, whilst the Kingston Coordinated Care Partnership Board reports two ways. It reports locally into the Health and Wellbeing Board, and it reports into the South West London ICS. So I know it's complex and it's an emerging piece, but there are the distinctions. So the Health and Wellbeing Board is a very, very important forum for this borough, because it is the one that will meet in public and set the strategy, and based on the JSNA and other pieces of evidence for our local population. So it will have a much broader membership than the borough committee. It will have all our partnership. So the Kingston Partnership Board is locally determined membership, reflecting local geography, responding to local needs. And what is the proposed scope is the next slide, and it talks about development delivery of the local health and care plan. Again, I think the roles and responsibilities of all these boards will evolve as we start to work in this new way. And we will look at things like the transformation business cases and having our shared communications engagement plans. So that is the scope of the board. The next slide does start to describe the membership. And you can see it's much broader membership to the CCG. Again, it's not set in stone, it's a draft, it needs to be refined, but it has a number of different people sitting around the table than what usually sits around our table. And with a real emphasis on the voluntary sector, the whole council. I'm going to look at Iona, so not just the DAS, the DPH and the DCS, the Director of Children's Services, so we have a whole range in the council. Primary care will be represented as providers through the primary care networks, and then obviously we'll be represented, the CCG will be represented by the borough committee. So you can see also we have your healthcare, Kingston Hospital, Health Watch, so a whole range of partners sitting around that table. That's the partnership board. Pharmacists will be a part of the primary care management group. So you have to, pharmacists are really important in primary care, and we have agreed that they will sit within the primary care management group. That will be the best place for them to be because of their real interface with community pharmacy within primary care. Pardon? So that is the decision. That it's unusual to have that. If you look at the other models across South West London, there is that pharmacists are not usually represented on these boards. They are within the primary care management group. So, but again, this is not my decision. This is not the CCG's decision. This is the partnership's decision, and we can discuss that further, whether community pharmacists are best to be represented on here or not. So the next steps for the local partnership is that we hope to start running it in shadow from 2020. The next meeting, I think, is the end of January, and we will look at things like terms of reference, chair, and also we can relook at the membership again. So that was all I had to say around the emerging integrated care partnership board in Kingston. I'm happy to take any questions, comments, observations.
That's really helpful, Tonya. So, sorry, Sarah.
So I think it is really difficult to get the membership of these new integrated partnerships right, and it's never simple. And you have to take a balance between kind of getting business done and having everybody around the table. So I think at least the main thing for me is that Kingston is starting to move towards something that looks like an integrated place with a significant chunk of both health and care people in the room having the discussion about how you take forward the local plans. We can always add, take away, change that as we move forward. But this is the first time all of the providers, and we've got a lot of providers around the table in Kingston, are coming together with the commissioners and others to look at how do we deliver things together in a different way. I think that's really positive.
Thank you. Any other comments? Sorry, I don't know.
Just to reiterate that, and being a current member of the partnership board, I think it's building on the work we've done already and strengthening that. I think clearly the work around Kingston Coordinated Care originated from a large proportion of these organisations being represented. So I think how it moves forward will reflect some of the strengths that we're already working to. Just one comment around Staywell is currently the voluntary sector organisation representative. So again, that may be something that we looked at going forward. So we are intending, or the partnership board was certainly discussed having voluntary sector representation, but not necessarily pinned down exactly who it will be within that group yet. That's for us to discuss still.
That's great, thank you. Any other comments or questions or points of clarity? Liz?
Yes, it was just picking up on a comment that Rob made previously, and I realised that having read lots of documents, I have lost sight of the answer. Primary care, will that be commissioned at borough level or at South West London level?
So a bit of both, really. So there will be only one single primary care committee for South West London. That's a formal statutory requirement. Each CCG can only have one. And you've got to remember that we don't do that on our own. It's a delegation from the NHS England, but they still retain ultimately accountability for that. So we follow the national rules around that. So we will have one South West London committee. However, we are setting up some protocols that allow local decisions to be made. Oh, excuse me. And those are set nationally as well, and with London as our regional office for NHS England. So many of the decisions, which are quite straightforward, can be made locally. But also the strategic intent can be done locally. So we have set up primary care management groups at each borough level that will have GPs, pharmacists and others on them, where they will look at what's the strategy for primary care, how's that going to work. But to ensure that there's no conflict or that decisions aren't made in a way that's unhelpful, we will have the South West London Primary Care Committee, which will have the formal sign-off if there's anything that looks like it could be conflicted at a local level.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No? Rob? No, it's not.
No, it's not. No, so you can delegate functions, but you can't take full accountability. Nobody can. That's just a legal position. And the primary care committees, they actually fulfil the requirement of the delegation that they get from NHS England in the same way as when we have a South West London CCG, there will be delegated functions to a borough level, but ultimately the statutory organisation retains accountability. But that doesn't mean that local decisions can't be made locally, and it doesn't mean that we won't strategically ensure that locally the local systems are driving what you want to do. That's absolutely the way we've set up the new CCG, so that won't be a problem. What we won't be having is borough level primary care committees, because you can't have 6 of those, but actually what the South West London Primary Care Committee will do will actually be very little actually, but it'll be that formal statutory part that's required that we will do with NHS England, which we've always done in primary care committees.
So our local bits will be the primary care management group, which will be doing the commissioning of primary care locally.
Yeah.
And it will be feeding into the borough committee as the central CCG bit. Well, actually the borough CCG bit. Richard, did you want to ask a question? So the social prescribing is actually done by NHS England via the DES. So it's actually a national contract through NHS England. So I didn't know whether you wanted to have a chat, Iona.
So in terms of how that's operating in Kingston, we have a borough-wide programme with our community connectors, so our local social prescribers being part of the current system within the 4 PCNs. So actually we've got a model that works really well and we're not proposing to change that. We've made arrangements with the GP leads for the 4 areas, and that's certainly running for at least the next year to just pilot how that's going. So.
I just say, so everybody in the country can do social prescribing because it's part of the national enhanced service. So the payment comes through from the national to the local, but how you do it locally is totally up to you. And that does not change. We currently do that through South West London. So all the payment comes through South West London. We don't do that at borough level. That comes back through the national team to South West London, then we put that out to the boroughs. But how you do it, so it's the PCNs, yeah. But how you do it locally is totally up to you. So the PCNs have a lot of opportunity to develop that themselves and to look at how they might develop social prescribing locally. But often people are doing it on a wider geography because there's lots of benefits to be gained from doing that.
Yeah, and also because Iona's team and the local authority have set it up really quite well, what we didn't want to do was undo the good work, and so we proposed that for the PCNs, and the PCNs have actually taken it up, which has been really helpful. Sorry, I didn't quite get that. Sorry, Richard. Great, thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions before we move on? No? Okay, Tonya?
Thank you. And then the final part of the paper starts to describe some of this system, a local system oversight that we've just been talking about. It is still very much a work in progress, so comments and observations between now and March and beyond will be most welcome. I won't go through every example in the paper, but maybe I can go through the primary care one, that might be useful. And also I'd like to just touch on the communications and engagement one. So if we could turn to the primary care one, this what on the left-hand side of the page tries to describe what will be the responsibility of local oversight. So locally we'll be retain responsibility for delivery of primary care transformation locally, primary care networks, primary care estates, and the continual improvement in the quality of primary care. We can only do that by working in matrix with the South West London primary care contracting team. So that's really important. We know we have to manage conflicts, so there's a really important piece in primary care around, we're working with primary care around that management of conflicts. We do know we need to put system development support in for primary care networks and agree some commissioning responsibilities to devolve to them in time, but we need to work very closely with our primary care networks in Kingston. And it's critical to bring together local primary care, locally enhanced services, our Kingston medical services and other primary care projects to align with the Kingston transformation aims and outcomes. And then the diagram on the right starts to describe how the flow through up into South West London would work. So we start very much with the 21 practices, the 5 PCNs and the federation that we have in Kingston. We then talked about the primary care management group, and that will be a much wider group around who are focused on the transformation of primary care. And that's where we discussed, say, the community pharmacists' input before. Then the primary care management group will report to the borough committee, and the borough committee obviously in partnership with the local partnership board as well. And we hope to retain most of the decision making around primary care at that level. But of course we do need to report back into the primary care committee. We'll obviously have to give regular updates of the work that we're doing, and if there's any issues that we need to escalate up, that will be through that process, and then obviously onto the governing body. So that's how we're trying to show how it would work locally, and we really want to work at that sort of borough level with the primary care management group and the practices and the PCNs. So that was just one, and we started to do some other functions, to say very much work in progress. The other one that we talked about was the quality, which is the next one. We're very keen to put a system quality improvement group in locally to be able to be very proactive around our quality issues, not a committee that is going to receive reports, but actually more about having that dialogue about what are our emerging concerns. And actually, our quality oversight is broader than we currently do. We do very much focus on the statutory bodies. We need to look at primary care. We just talked about social prescribing. We need to quality assure that offer as well. So there is other areas that we need to also make sure we have the right quality oversight. as I say, we'll develop these more further over the next couple of months and bring back to seminar in February. But the last area I wanted to just bring to the members' attention was the communications and engagement, and particularly our engagement with the population in Kingston. We do have a very vibrant communications engagement group that's been running for 18 months now, that works across Kingston and Richmond and can really support our local engagement with our local population engagement in Kingston. And the idea, what we've been floating with members of the public, is around establishing the community engagement reference group, which would be a much broader representation than we've had previously, and brings together what sometimes is quite siloed pieces of engagement that is going on. So the membership is inclusive, so we're not saying this is the only people that can be there, but it would be Health Watch, the community and voluntary sector, the NHS Trust public governors, very, very keen to get the FT governors involved in this piece of work, the borough umbrella groups, the patient reference groups, community forum reps, multi-faith forums, equality groups, lots of people that we can bring together in different ways. It doesn't all have to be about face-to-face meetings. We can do this virtually. We can start to establish a network. And the idea being that this group receives information on borough health and care plans and priorities, and has opportunities to ask questions, discuss and influence, and supports joined-up engagement and communications across borough partners. So I think this is a real opportunity for us to really strengthen our integrated community engagement, supporting, working with the partnership board, so we have a real strong voice from the population in our decision making. That's all I was going to say on the paper, but again, happy to take any questions, conversation, observations or comments.
Great. Any comments from board members? Nine.
Thanks for that, Tonya. I was just wondering, where will local decisions be made about IT? There doesn't seem to be any reference to this locally. We talked about it at South West London CCG level, but there's no process outlined for local decisions. So
Give me an example.
we have software such as DocMan, which we have problems with, and we want to have a conversation with South West London about the future of DocMan or alternatives. We're struggling at the moment, but in this system here, we don't have a voice at all. Or apparently we don't have a voice at all.
So I would have thought DocMan would come through the primary care management group, wouldn't it? It would be through the primary care IT. Primary care IT would be through the primary care management group.
I believe DocMan was brought on behalf of Whole South West.
There will need to be a link from the primary care management group into the IT team. So the IT service will be delivered from South West London, but we need to make sure we've got that link. And it's not just primary care either, because if we do local transformation, we want to understand what's going on in IT as well.
I think one of the other comments that I've heard from other primary care colleagues was that the IT service that we do tend to get for primary care is generally much better than the IT service across the rest of South West London. And so what we didn't want to do, well, my colleagues stated to me they didn't want to go backwards within this merger itself, and actually retain the service that we've actually got within IT support as well.
Yeah.
David.
It's a comment that I've possibly made before, and excuse me, state my voice. But I want to just go back. Where does this all come from? Because I can well understand the degree of confusion amongst the wider community of people who've taken interest in healthcare as to why this is happening at this stage. And I would remind everybody it's because of a draconian cut in management costs and a genuine belief that transformation of the way services are delivered has to be significant and it's got to be effective. And the belief is that that can be done probably better as a consequence of the change that's being made here to a South West London organisation. Now, there's precedent for that in the history of the NHS. To some degree, especially at this age, there's a tendency to go back and say, well, we're repeating previous experience. There's no reason why that's necessarily a problem if it's good experience. So I think that there was and still is a very good case to be made for this huge change. On a personal basis, I should say that I've been enormously impressed at the sophistication of the changes that are being proposed. This hasn't been put together overnight. This has been a major piece of work, and I've been enormously impressed at the quality of the work that has emerged and what seems to me to be the robustness of the proposals that are being made. However, I think success will be ultimately dependent on there being adequate management resource at the borough level to actually deliver what is in this paper. And that includes people locally, specifically imposed locally, of appropriate seniority, but also the support that would be given from South West London and the core staff there. And I think that the critical task, the critical challenge over the next 6 months to a year or so is actually to get that right and therefore get the balance between the South West London work and the local borough level work. That's going to be very, very hard in these straitened circumstances, but therein, as far as I'm concerned, is the key to its success. But fundamentally, it is a legitimate challenge to the problems that were posed some 6 months, 9 months ago when this started. And to that extent, I really do think that this is a very imaginative and appropriate way forward.
So thank you very much for that. Can I start and then hand over to Tonya about the management resource locally? So thank you. And yes, I think there are a number of drivers for this, but I think there's huge potential. So firstly, we did have a number of drivers. I think one was we do have to make management cost reductions of 20%. And the best way of us doing that is by taking out some of the works that actually isn't adding value to patients. So that's about taking out some of our sort of back office governance, the kind of transactional work that we do. And by doing it in this way and doing some of those at scale, we can achieve that while still retaining a level of local management resource support and clinical leadership that allows us to do the transformation that we want to do. So that's the first thing. The second, I think, is about working as a system and getting rid of, to some extent, the commissioner and provider split and thinking about how do we work together in order to get the best outcomes for local people. And I think what we're trying to achieve here is both of those things. So we're trying to get the benefits of scale where we can get those, and there are things that we've done across South West London together where we have gained the benefits, but also trying to make sure that the local working, particularly breaking down those barriers between health providers, commissioners and care providers, will be getting the absolute maximum benefit that we can for local population. So thank you for that, and I think that's what we're trying to do, and I think you're right that it's not easy and we still have a job to do to make that work. Tonya, did you want to say something about the capacity and how we're doing that?
No, and well, yes, I will. No, I don't. Yeah, I will, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think I've sat here before and said there's a huge amount of time that's spent on servicing structures and governances that is important, but actually freeing up my time to do other things and my team's time to do other things to support partners to deliver the transformation of services that we all aspire to. I think actually it's quite energising for the team as well. Capacity is always an issue. We never have enough capacity, but we can use our capacity smartly and do the things that really matter. So, and I know that we will be and I know when we've been doing our thinking around the structure, we've tried to build in a little bit of flexibility around actually, if we do, when we get to the point when we start running this for real, actually, if we have a big yawning gap, if we can't fill it, we might be able to flex some of our capacity. So I think it's actually, once we get through this part of the consultation and get people into post, I think, as Fergus said, there's huge opportunities that I think people will see, and actually it will re-energise our teams to really start to deliver some transformation and not be bogged down in some of the more bureaucratic practices that we have to fulfil, because we are a statutory body, a single statutory body at the moment. So.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members? No. Richard.
I hope as early as possible in this year. I'm looking to Vicky because it was Caroline and Hannah, isn't it, who are leading this. I don't know if you've got an actual date.
we haven't got a specific date. I mean, I think it's something that will grow and develop over time, but I think we've made quite a lot of progress in socialising the idea and getting all the organisations to work together, so it's just building on that.
I wasn't asking you sort of in a finalised form, but have you got a kick-off date in mind for this?
Well, in a sense, we already have started it, and we've started to go out to different fora to get people's views. So we're already doing it and just building it incrementally as we go.
Inaugural meeting of the engagement forum as soon as we can in the new year.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No. Tonya, thank you very much for a really comprehensive outline on there. Can I just take the board back to an action that Naeem is meant to feedback on, which was on page 10/11. Page 13/14 of the public question time. So it was around the IT services at Kingston Hospital and discharge summaries, whether you had any information around the date range on this.
Right, so apologies for being late in the first place, Chair. I had a chat with Mr. Allen by email, and we didn't really identify the 500 cases. And I talked to Kevin Fitzgerald, who's the IM&T lead at Kingston Hospital, and he said that, a quote, we have almost no visibility of whether a discharge summary has been read. So Kingston Hospital don't seem to have a system by which they can tell whether GPs have read discharge summaries or not. But I was waiting for more information from this.
I apologise that I've not gone back to you.
So
Thank you very much.
we'll have to carry that forward,
Yep, no,
and
we will
I'll
do.
continue to liaise with Kevin at the hospital.
Okay, fine.
I'll
Rob.
just give you an example.
I think time, Rob. I think the time has moved as regards the HIE access. So even if the GP doesn't have a discharge letter in front of him, they can access the hospital records.
There is a training issue.
Yeah, right, I understand that, and maybe that's something we can take back to the practices then, okay, just to make sure they're quite aware. But we have fed that back to all the practices at the council of members on a couple of occasions around their health information exchange and about being able to get access to the hospital records. And I think also the hospital, quite a lot of the hospital staff actually still also don't realise that they can actually access GP records as well.
Yeah. Can I just say it might be slightly different for Epsom St Helier, because I think they are the only they're the only hospital at the moment in South West London that isn't yet up the up-to-date CERNA process. So, sorry, that's the IT system that they use, and I think there is an issue with Epsom St Helier until we get them updated.
The actual notes were on Epsom's...
Yeah, so if it was Epsom St Helier, then I can understand why it may not be accessible by the GP. It's the only hospital in South West London.
We went back into the receptionist.
Yeah, no.
She put that.
Yes.
But in Kingston, I think I'm correct in saying so.
Yes, it's something different.
It's different.
Frankly, that this full exchange.
Yes, exactly. So it's all fine in Kingston, but I think if you're looking between Epsom St Helier and your GP practice, it might be an issue. But we will get that sorted.
Okay, thank you. So if we can move on to Fergus's IQGC report, please. That's page 82 in your pack.
Thank you. Familiar report for the governing body. This report covers the meetings that we held on the 19th of November and the 17th of December. And I'll cover three broad areas within that: latest performance, operating plan, and some feedback from some of the clinical quality areas that we've been scrutinising. First thing to say, we're well into the winter period now at this stage. I wanted to say thank you particularly to our acute providers and primary care providers for the sterling work that they have done over the winter period and into Christmas and the New Year. It's a really difficult period of time. I'm really pleased to say that our system locally is holds up well in comparison to the rest of South West London and the wider London area. But that's not without a huge amount of planning and a great amount of effort from the teams, so particular thanks for that. Within the performance narrative, I've mentioned previously that we are running very close to the referral to treatment target, and that is going to prove a challenge for us within Kingston as a result of some of the performance at Epsom and St Helier and St George's, whilst Kingston Hospital is now recovering its position and performs strongly. In terms of our 6-week waits for diagnostics, again, I've reported that there was a challenge, particularly around cardiology, which has now been rectified. There are a couple of areas that we still have some work to do. Most notably, I draw the governing body's attention to performance around physical health checks for people with severe mental illness and physical health checks for people with learning disabilities. We will continue having the Integrated Quality Governance Committee both in January and in March, so I will continue to monitor and check on progress towards achievement of those. Within the operating plan supporting activity, there are a couple of anomalies that I just wanted to draw, again, the governing body's attention to. So consultant-led first outpatient appointments and outpatient procedures. There have been a couple of errors, one that we've known about all year in relation to outpatient procedures, where our calculations and our submission to NHS England fell out of line with the operating plan. That we've reported on that to each governing body so far this year. And there was a duplicate element around the consultant-led first outpatient appointments, which the Trust has now put right, so I'm not worried about that. In terms of the clinical quality review groups, Tonya mentioned already about our performance around emergency preparedness. We had another internal audit outcome, which was in relation to our, the internal auditors conducted a review of our oversight and management of contracts that we hold, particularly from a clinical quality and assurance perspective, and we get a very high level of assurance from them. Really pleased about that, and it particularly drew attention to the good working relationships that we have within our local system. There isn't anything specifically I'd want to draw to people's attention about individual providers, but just wanted to note that when standing back and looking more thematically at it, workforce and pressures around the workforce, I think, is something that all of our providers are reporting some significant challenges around. Fair to say each individual HR department and team have got well-developed and well-implemented plans around recruitment, retention, and so on and so forth. But I think it's only right that we recognise here that the workforce challenges for lots of our providers, whether they be doctors, nurses, therapists, or other groups of staff, they are and will continue to be for a challenge for us within the local system. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? I mean, a few of us are quite well versed in the IQGC report. So any questions from board members? No. Okay. Sorry, Gareth.
Thanks, Fergus. It was just one quick question about the dementia diagnosis rate, which looks fantastic that that's green and achieved, I think, for the first time in ages. But I'm just checking about that. Have we maintained it? In the last meeting, there's a mention about maintaining it in September. And then in this paper, it talks about September as well. Do you know if there's been an update in the figures since September or whether that's not been reported yet?
I felt we'd done enough bragging on that one, but yeah. So I've hid our light under the bushel a little bit, and yes, we've continued to achieve it each month since we started achieving it. So even our most recent data says that we've sustained that performance.
That's been really good. An awful lot of work's gone into that, so many congratulations to the team.
If you're feeling competitive, we're doing slightly better in Kingston than we are in Richmond even at this stage.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fergus.
I propose we have that at our celebration event next meeting. Make sure that that's part of our celebration.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fergus. Okay, so if we can come to the Finance Committee summary. So Jenny, or James, Jenny? Jenny?
Okay, so this is the finance report for November, and which was taken to the Finance Committee in December. So in November, the CCG reported break-even position, which is in line with the planned target. We're meeting all of our business rules and key financial targets. But we do have some overspends. We have overspends in acute, in continuing care, in mental health, and in prescribing. So in acute, we're seeing overperformance at St George's in elective, Epsom in orthopaedics, and at Guy's in critical care and maternity. But the Kingston Hospital contract is within the 2% cap, and we're not expecting that we will be paying any overperformance on that contract for this year. So mental health, there's also some overspends in mental health placements, but that has actually improved in November as some have stepped down. Continuing healthcare is also an overspending, so we've seen much higher growth than in previous years. So we're seeing over 10% growth, which is much higher than is planned. And we're seeing price rises as well, which reflects the complexity of the patients. And so in primary care, we're seeing overspends in prescribing, which is largely around the increases to the drug tariff. So all these overspends are being offset partly by reserves, but we are also using some non-recurrent, some one-off benefits to balance the position and bring us back to break even. And that means that we're reporting an underlying deficit of 4.2 million, and that's stayed fairly stable for the last few months. And we're reporting some risks to the position as well. So the risks are getting lower as we get towards the end of the year, but our mitigations against those risks are also depleting. So we're reporting a net risk of 700k, and that would mean that if all those risks come about, then we'll have a deficit of 700k by the end of the year. So there was one other thing that I wanted to highlight that was brought to the Finance Committee, and that was the audit of the mental health investment standard. So this is a national audit that our external auditors has been doing in Kingston and all other CCGs. And it's an audit of the achievement of the target in 2018-19. So the requirement is for CCGs to increase the mental health spend by more than the increase in resource allocation. So that for Kingston was that Kingston was required to increase mental health spend by more than 3.5% in 18-19. So we've had the draft report back from the auditors. We're expecting the final report next week. We're not expecting any more changes to that report. So the report states that the CCG has met the MHAS target. However, it is an opinion which they called it's a qualified opinion, which they're calling an except for opinion. And this is because they've identified a couple of errors in the application of the NHS England guidance. So even with those errors corrected, the CCG will have met the target, but that will need to be resubmitted figures for 2018-19 to NHS England. So that was everything I wanted to say on the report.
Great, thanks, James.
Yeah, just add the one big bit to pull out of that really is the underlying position, which clearly we've had a history of good financial performance at Kingston. That's now starting to shift in terms of we've had to manage the position this year with significant non-recurrent. So as we go into the planning round, that's going to be the big challenge, is we're going to need to make some recurrent changes to bring that underlying position back down. So that's going to be our next challenge over the next 3 or 4 months, to make sure that as we go into the operating plan, we can demonstrate that that run rate is starting to come down, because we won't have the non-recurrent sort of flexibility next year that we've had this year.
Thank you, that's helpful. Any other comments or questions for the summary report? Liz?
I wondered if I could crave the indulgence of the chair, because I'd actually got something on Fergus's report that I realised that I'd made a note of and didn't actually spot in my handwriting. I wondered if I could ask about that.
Yeah, no, it's not a problem. And
Is that
what
okay?
we'll do, we'll finish this bit first and then we'll come back to you. So any other comments around the finance summary report? No? Okay, so if we just finish the financial bit and then come back to you, Liz, if that's okay. So can we come to the report itself? anything else you wanted it? You just wanted it was all wrapped up. Okay, so Liz.
Yes, and sorry, I've used electronic page numbering, Fergus, so I'm not sure whether you'll be able to find it on your papers. It's electronic page 115, and it's continuing healthcare referrals in Kingston with under 28-day target. And in quarter one, 88.9% were achieved within the 28 days. In quarter two, that plummeted to 56.5%. Whereas, so it was in the red for quarter two, whereas generally it seems to have been okay previously. And I was just wondered what it was that had triggered that sudden decrease.
Thanks, Liz. And I've got the detail with me here. So we had a particular issue with Your Healthcare. Your Healthcare are the community provider who undertake the nursing assessments for people with regards to their eligibility and their care needs for continuing healthcare. And they had a problem with their staffing during the summer period. I'm pleased to say that has been rectified and they are improving. The data that we have here is a little bit older, and part of the challenge is that it's very small numbers. So 2 or 3 patients will make the difference between hitting the target and missing it by quite a way. So I'm pleased to say that we've got good visibility on that. We do look at it in more detail in the quarterly continuing healthcare reports, and we do monitor because, again, as Jenny has just been talking about, the importance of the management and control of continuing healthcare. It's a particular area that finance and the quality team work closely hand in hand with regards. I will say we will have continuing pressures around this because of when we've talked before about the changes to placement without prejudice. So that is a pathway for patients to access continuing healthcare. Because we knew we were doing too much of that, we had to trim back, and that will in some way contribute to a small reduction in our historically very positive performance around this particular measure. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Fergus. Right, so if we can come to the councillor members' report. Atin.
Thanks, Chair. So since the last report, the Council of Members has met on 2 occasions. At the November meeting, Catherine Yates attended to update members on a pilot running in Kingston to provide clinical supervision for general practice nurses. The pilot enhances the clinical supervision in practices for nurses with a more formalised governance process. So far, feedback's been very positive, and we hope practices will uptake this, and hopefully it will also help with nurse retention moving forwards. Omid Gillenshah provided members with a primary care update focusing on the new networks, Kingston Medical Services, and an update on the Harry target performance. We were also advised of the new requirements for CCGs to support primary care in reporting and managing serious incidents. I think for the time being, primary care are to notify significant incidents to Ruth Harkness at the CCG, but I imagine that will change moving forwards after April. Members were also made aware of the very high spend on interpreting services by Kingston as compared to neighbouring CCGs, and we think this is due to the high use of face-to-face services rather than over the phone or digital. An options appraisal of possible future services is in development for discussion at the next Primary Care Quality Development Group. And finally, Naz Giovanni discussed the local leadership options and consultation following the yes vote to merge CCGs. One of the next steps is to take forward the development of the clinical leadership at borough level and South West London, but for the borough level we agreed some basic principles such as preserving the role of the Council of Members as a decision-making forum, optimising clinical leadership and retaining influence on decision-making, and working more closely with Kingston Hospital. Members were asked to establish a small task and finish group to continue this discussion, and that group has been formed and has met once since the last meeting. At the December meeting, Dr. Claire Armstrong, our newly appointed Learning Disabilities Clinical Lead, gave a presentation on LD health checks, how we're performing in Kingston, and went through what we're doing well and some of the barriers and how we can overcome these moving forwards. We welcomed Dr. Farid Bazari, one of our local respiratory consultants from Kingston, who led a discussion on the newly developed primary care respiratory referral form. Members noted the new form has been designed to streamline the process and to provide secondary care with more pertinent and relevant information so that they can triage the referrals more effectively. And Dr. Annette Ports, on behalf of Naz Giovanni, updated members on the latest developments on the formation of the Borough Committee. Tonia's already gone into details of this, so I won't repeat that. But I think moving forwards, the plan is obviously to finalise the process in January with a view to run the election in February at the Council of Members. Members did seek clarification on who can put themselves forward for the voting member roles in future, and also whether the electorate from the membership is going to be voting, or can it be any GP? But I think we've discussed that, and we'll finalise that by January. Thank you very much.
Okay, any comments or questions? Fergus?
Just to reassure the governing body, serious incident management and reporting, whilst it will be coordinated at the South West London level, this will be led by our local team within Kingston Richmond, so Ruth will remain the point of contact. So, as it is still correct.
Any other comments or questions? No? Thank you very much, Asin. So if we just make the board aware, there are some papers for information. So there's the Board Assurance Framework, which is item I. I'm presuming that you didn't want to add anything, Vicky, around this. There's also the South West London minutes from the Finance Committee in Common. Again, James, you don't want to add anything around this? Okay. There's the glossary of terms, which is Appendix K. And finally, I just want to ask members of the public, are there any other questions that you want to ask us before we close the meeting down? No? So just to let you know, the next meeting on the 3rd of March is a celebration of CCG achievement, and we really hope that you will be attending, and there will be past and present CCG members that will be invited to the meeting. And I think we should celebrate the closure of one organisation before moving to another organisation, to actually understand the level of achievement that we have done in our local area. So unless there's any other items of urgent business, I will close this part of the meeting, and just to allow members 5 minutes, if that's okay, before we then move into the other room for part 2.